Oh, Spencer Barton has a question about David Lynch. David Lynch, R.I.P. David Lynch, a truly unique American artist. Really, really amazing. I did fake TED Talks with Paul and Storm at Cobb's last Friday night as part of Sketchfest, and Rob Corddry did his fake TED Talk as David Lynch, and it was beautiful. It was chef's kiss, magnificent. Rob is so smart and so kind. It was delightful. And a few years ago, I was lucky enough to interview David Lynch on stage, specifically about transcendental meditation, and then also about films and creativity. I found him personally and on stage to be so present, so completely in the room, so completely attuned to everyone in the room. It was quite inspiring to be just near him and to actually be able to converse and talk about art. Because I believe he would say the same thing I've been saying, that all of these different processes are analogous to each other, and that we're on this journey to go through creativity. And I haven't even gotten to Spencer Barton's question. The question is, on ideas and creation, David Lynch talked about catching the big fish. Have you ever had a moment of realizing you had snagged a big one? Yeah, so Lynch talks about that as sort of like, he talked about that in the interview. You can find the interview with him on City Arts and Lectures, and if you're watching this after the live stream, we'll include a link in the description. But he talks about that like getting your mindset grounded and then like diving into the deep pool where all the cool shit happens. And he calls that catching a big fish. The first thing that comes to my mind is my no-face moment on the Comic-Con floor in 2008, 2009, 2010. So I'm dressed as No-Face. I'm on the Comic-Con floor at San Diego. I don't have a mouth. So this is the first iteration of my No-Face. And yeah, it's like 15 years ago. And I'm walking through the San Diego Comic-Con floor, and every time someone asks for a picture, I don't speak from inside the mask. I worked on my no-face poses and feeling meek and looking meek and maybe sometimes making sounds like No-Face does. And I had little gold coins secreted behind my gown. And when I was done taking a picture, I would hold out my black gloved hand and I would give them a gold coin. And I mean, this is the anchor of my TED Talk, a love letter to cosplay. Eventually, someone gave me back one of the coins, and I realized that they gave it back to me because gold from No-Face is bad luck in the universe of Spirited Away, the movie No-Face is from. And when I felt that, I am a performer, I'm an artist, and I love connecting with an audience. I seek a connection with an audience as a performer, as a speaker, as a communicator. And on that floor, a level of audience communication was happening that I didn't even realize was as deep and cool as it was until it happened to me. But when that person angrily put a coin back into my hand, that was an emotional moment. I could feel the emotion in there putting it back. And that interaction to me describes a theater where audience and performers are blurred. And that's really cool. There's some really interesting stuff happening at that moment. We are all playing. We're playing our own movies, but somehow they're gelling and they're creating something bigger than what each of us is thinking about. That felt like a big fish. And it's so funny because it didn't even occur to me to really talk about that as a structured talk, but I had written a talk about my career for the TED people, and I had performed it for them in rehearsal, and they had said, that is a bad talk. They didn't quite say that's a bad talk, but they were like, that talk doesn't work. The TED editors are amazing, and they speak in they did not pull their punches with me. And I really appreciate that. They were like, this line, that doesn't work. And this whole thing, it seems self-aggrandizing, you shouldn't do it. And they were completely right. And that's when my wife was like, have you talked about cosplay? Have you told the no face story? And I was like, no. And telling that story on the TED stage also felt like catching a big fish, because that was unique in the talks that I have given in a lot of ways. And I won't get into them right now. Talk for another time. But like, yeah, that also felt like catching a big fish. I think catching a big fish is involved in your ambition, but it's also just like when the work really surprises you, when you learn something new about yourself from the work, which isn't always. Those epiphanies, actually in my lifespan, I find that they get further and further between. But the high from those moments of self-realization and self-actualization, they buoy me between the incidents and keep my eyes on the prize. BaldoFraggins, I see what you did there. BaldoFraggins says, what does retirement look like for you? Can you ever see yourself stopping what you do in a professional sense? Oh, yes. Sure. Sure. I can see myself stopping what I do in a professional sense for the most part. My wife asked me this just in the last few months. What does retirement look like for you? And you know, my first answer was, there's always going to be a workbench in my daily grind. Like, whether I'm filming it or not, I want to go to a workbench 5 days a week. I'm paced for that. I love doing that. So the workbench is never leaving the equation. I also love talking to people. I love building talks to talk to groups of people. I love doing Q&As with audiences. Right now, my love of doing that, plus my facility at doing that, is a large part of my income. Going out and doing that for corporations, doing that at cons, doing that in the various enterprises that I, get paid to do it. And certainly that's going to slow down. But like Lauren Peterson, my friend from ILM, one of the original ILM model makers and the model shop supervisor for Empire Strikes Back, still travels and speaks. And they're fewer and farther between, but like, I find that really inspiring. We've also spent a lot of the last few years thinking, where do we want to live as we're winding up, as we're quieting down, maybe when we can't walk upstairs anymore. And it's still hard to conclude that we want to live anywhere else but San Francisco. And honestly, we feel really lucky to be here. And I mean, it's still one of the most beautiful places in the world, and that's not going anywhere soon. And, in the worst case scenario, we could live on the ground floor of our house where we don't have to climb stairs. There's enough room down there for us to live, and we could rent out the upstairs, for instance. We have all sorts of thoughts about this. And none of them are etched in stone. It's just sort of like, yeah, I'm in my late 50s. My wife is in her early 60s, and it's so funny being this age, because when I was a kid, man, 57 was old. 57 was like the principal's dad. That was old. It doesn't feel old from here. I was actually trying to commiserate with a couple of people who were talking about their gray hair, and I'm like, I know, I've gone so all the red is gone. And they're like, you're just a blonde. It doesn't look like old hair. It just looks like you turned into a blonde. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I wanted to briefly mention that you could become a tested member. I know, everybody is competing for you to become a member of their thing. What I want to express to you is that the tested membership has become such an important part of the tested family. We get tremendous feedback from the tested members, and they expand the stories that we can tell and the things that we have access to. And you can become a part of it right now by clicking on the link below. See you in the chat.